Okay, I think everybody's heard that there's now a revenue problem, and we have some specific proposals that we'd like to go through. Please welcome Ron Baiman. You can speak there or come here, whatever you prefer.
Yeah. Thank you. Good evening. I don't have a paper copy, so I'm gonna stand out here and look at my PowerPoint here as I speak. Thank you all for inviting me. I really appreciate this opportunity. I think it's a very important issue, and we really need to understand what's going on here. Next slide, please. The way as I think many of you will agree, this is what we have here is a kind of hysteria, I think. Just as we have on the national stage with the deficit, the federal deficit suddenly becoming the major problem when before the election it was jobs. Now it became deficit. A very swift turn around in priorities, if I could borrow from the previous speaker. But in any case, just as in the federal level, the Fed should be increasing and not reducing deficit spending to create jobs and increase taxes on the wealthy to support a much higher level of pre-deficit social spending. Illinois for decades has been taxing the wealthy and corporations at much too low a rate to support even its very low level of social spending. Both need to increase dramatically. And as a number of speakers have already said, Illinois' pension deficit is a state debt problem, not a pension spending problem, or really a revenue problem, as I'll say. And the title of this slide, Illinois' structural budget deficit is the result of too little revenue, not too much spending. And I have some data. This is after the 2011 tax increase. We're 38th in overall state and local taxes as a share of personal income. We would have to spend raise 4.4 billion more just to become a median state, that is to be 25th among the states in taxes as a share of our state personal income, which is really the proper measure because it's a measure of capacity. Wealthier states can afford to raise more money. So if we had a percentage of our personal income equal to the 25th state, we would have to raise 4.4 billion more in tax revenue. We're also very regressive, and this might even be more critical, as other speakers have pointed out. We have the third highest rate of overall income, sales, and property tax on the lowest 20% of families, of non-elderly families, and third highest, I'm sorry. So we tax the bottom 20% at the third highest rate among all the states. And we have the 12th lowest rate on the top 1%. And this is 2007 data from the Institute for Taxation and Economic Policy in Washington. Our spending on public services would have to increase by 5.9 billion as a share of state GDP to have a median level of spending. That's general fund spending. It would actually have to increase by 12.8 billion just to match what the average state is spending as a share of our GDP. This is again after the 2011, and this is net of pensions. So I've taken pensions out of the equation just to look at real spending on public services, because the pension issue in Illinois is confounded by the fact that most of that is actually debt spending. It's not for current pensions, as we'll see. Oh, now we're on to the corporate taxes. So on the corporate tax, there's been a lot of misinformation saying that our tax rate is now the highest, higher than Wisconsin and Indiana in particular. This is not accurate. 2.5% of that tax, of the corporate tax, is a personal property replacement tax that is levied separately in Indiana and Wisconsin. So you can't really, and that entire 2.5% actually gets rebated to the localities, to local government. So it doesn't go into the state tax revenue pool. So the proper comparison is 7% versus 7.9 and 8.5%. Only about 10% of Illinois business establishments are C corporations liable for corporate income tax, and of those, only a third, that is 39,000, pay any corporate income tax, and only 367 Illinois corporations pay over $1 million. So the claim of Illinois businesses that they're overtaxed, the tax rate is too high, is just not justified by the data. In fact, the state has numerous tax subsidies for businesses and for corporations, and that's one of the reasons, probably the primary reason why 2/3 of corporations pay no income tax. Now, some of those could be justified as part of the kind of war between the states to attract jobs and so forth, but many of them cannot, and we'll get into that. Next slide, please. Okay, now regarding the pensions, I mean, some of you are probably have more detailed expertise on this than I do, but if you just look at some of the data from COGFA, that's the state scorekeeper on economic data, and CTBA, which utilizes a lot of the COGFA information, the pension normal costs were only $1.6 billion of the $4.1 billion state pension payment in FY12, and only $1.6 billion of the $5.1 billion due in FY13. The normal costs are actually the costs that current retirees accrue, the pension liability, a year's worth of pension liability that the current retiree accrues when they retire on average. So there's a calculation saying, okay, everybody who's currently working, they're working for this year, how much more pension liability have they accrued by working this year? And that's the normal cost. So it's the real cost of paying current retirees on a yearly, as each year accrues, that increase it accumulates for each retiree. So that the actual cost for current retirees in the future when they retire is $1.6 billion. That has not gone up at all. All of that, the rest of that money, the difference between 1.6 and 4.1 and 1.6 and 5.1 is paying back the past pension debt. It's not paying for any current or even future liability of current employees in the system. And this is across all 5 pension systems. The 1996 to 2010, again, COGFA data, 43% of the increase in unfunded pension liability is due to falling employer contributions. Only 11.4% is employee salary. All the rest of it is other factors, including the stock market, which Representative Chapalavia mentioned. But really, the key thing is the employer contribution shortfall, not the falling stock market. And then they talk about the average pension 2011. This is again across all 5 pension systems. It's not out of line, given that Illinois is the 12th richest state per capita in the country. I mean, you'd expect it to be a little bit higher than the average of 27,000 versus 23,000. Next slide, please. I'm sorry to burden you with all these numbers, but part of the effort here is to kind of explain a little bit what that unfunded liability is. And in simple terms, they often is calculated using different parameters, but some of the standard parameters that are used are the 8% investment return assumption, 3% inflation, based on assumptions that are close to that, approximately that. The 33-year time horizon liability has been set most recently at $94.6 billion, again by actuaries working for COGFA. Now, there's a requirement that private pension systems and state pension systems have this 33 years of a fund that will pay out pensions for 33 years in the present. A different way to run a pension system is Social Security, which is basically a pay-go system. I mean, there's some smoothing for demographics and things like that, but you don't have to have 33 years of Social Security payments accumulated right now in the Social Security system. That would probably be a much better and easier pension system. It makes sense certainly for private companies to have 33 years of payments. They can go bankrupt, then the feds have to, they're at least partially insured by ERISA, pick up the tab, and so you want them to have a pool to maintain some kind of secure pension system. The way the actuarial accounting works right now, and certainly the credit agencies are requiring that states also have this large fund. But in some ways, this deficit is really it's a kind of an actuarial requirement rather than a real requirement. We have even the payments currently are more than enough to pay current retirees. Okay, next slide. I'll try and move this along. So one way to raise revenue to deal with this is to eliminate tax loopholes. One of the most egregious is the one just passed last year, which is the CME income tax reduction, $85 million. CME is surely one of the most profitable companies in the world. They have a 33% profit rate, $1 billion in profits, or certainly in Illinois. Their tax liability was reduced by $85 million. It makes hardly any difference in their overall profit. It goes from 30% to 29%. I'm sorry, 29 to 30 by getting this tax break. But they lobbied heavily for it. They were given the tax break. Foreign dividends, we refused to decouple from accelerated depreciation. We've also not decoupled from this I'm sorry, this is not a decoupling issue. This is just Illinois. This is even worse. We, for some reason, exempt foreign dividends from taxes. And these are all IDOR estimates of the value. So that's $386 million. That one change there is $386 million. If we did not exempt the income derived by Illinois corporations from their foreign dividends. It's basically what's going on here from taxation. Next slide. Domestic production credit. This is the one I was thinking of. We have not decoupled, so they get a federal exemption, a tax break on domestic production. Many states, 22 other states have decoupled. Illinois has not. So what it means is we end up giving them a state tax break also, in addition to the federal tax break, state tax break that may be derived from their production in other states, in fact. It's domestic production, not Illinois production. So this makes very little sense, even for if you're making the assumption that somehow this is going to create jobs in Illinois. Online hotel purchases, the $25 million says we're allowing the tax to apply only to the rate that Priceline pays instead of the final price. We could increase $25 million. Next slide, please. There's only two more of these. Offshore oil drilling. This is not taxed. These are production activities take place in the outer continental shelf that are not taxed by Illinois, although many other states now tax this income. Why on earth are we giving a tax break to offshore oil drilling we don't even have offshore oil drilling in Illinois? I mean, this is really crazy. Retailers discount, again, this is money we give to retailers to collect sales tax. In the old days, maybe there was some paperwork involved, they had to keep accounting. Now it's all done electronically. There really is no heavy burden here. We're giving retailers $109 million to collect the sales tax. So it's effectively a sales tax rebate to retailers. Okay, you sum all these up, next slide, $880 million. Just those 6 egregious tax breaks. Now, just to give a sense, because we have this enormous number, the $94.6 billion pension liability, it looks like a huge number. How can we ever solve this problem without, emasculating all of our pension systems and cutting services and so forth? Well, that's 33 years of liabilities. If we did the same thing for that $880 million, we'd come up with $70.5 billion. Okay, it's the number there, 74% of the FY12 so-called unfunded pension liability could be solved by eliminating those tax breaks and putting that money into a fund and letting that fund accrue the same assumptions, 8% return, 3% inflation, the net present value of that in FY 2013 would be $70.5 billion. So it's exactly the same calculation. And we would, 2/3 of the way solve the pension problem. Now, actuarially, they want the state to have the money now. And they've front-loaded all the payments. So $4 billion, $5 billion, we're paying enormous amounts of money in the pension system, not because we need that for current retirees or even for the liability of current workers in the future. It's just because we're trying to make up the past debt that has not been paid into that. But if we smooth that out and just said, okay, let's not front load, let's just pay that, over 30 years, maybe we borrow up front, we pay the interest, whatever, or we pay it, we find ways to make the pension payments closer to what the actual costs are, instead of front loading everything, the whole thing becomes much more manageable. And of course, if we could get a more rational system, in my view, where we'd instead of summing the pension liabilities for 33 years and trying to make the payments 33 years ahead of time, then we could even go further with that. But in any case, the point is, $302 million more in revenue would eliminate 100% of the FY13 liability. It's a moving target. Every year it's going to change, but it just gives some sense that this is not an insurmountable problem by any means. There's no reason we should be cutting, and I absolutely agree. It's immoral. It's illegal. It's just a terrible idea, and it's absolutely the wrong thing in an economic downturn. We need to increase spending. We need to increase pensions, increase money going into the economy, not take money out of the economy. It's absolutely the wrong approach. So thank you very much.